The evening was colder than usual. A biting November chill wrapped tightly around the city streets like an unwelcome visitor. Claire sat by the window of her small apartment, the soft hum of distant traffic a muted background to the quiet of her own thoughts. Her life had settled into a predictable rhythm after years of restless searching, a solitary existence filled with books, warm tea, and the comforting silence of routine. She wasn't lonely exactly, just accustomed to being alone. Then, just as the streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows over the damp pavement, there was a soft but urgent knock at her door. Claire hesitated, her heart catching in her throat. Visitors were rare. Curious, she wrapped her shawl tighter and opened it cautiously. Standing there was a little girl, no older than 8 or 9, with tear-streaked cheeks and eyes that seemed far too tired for someone so young. In her small hands she clutched a crumpled postcard worn at the edges as if it had been carried through storms and sleepless nights. Behind her stood a man, older, worn down by something Claire couldn't yet understand. His eyes were heavy with exhaustion and fear, and yet there was a quiet resolve in his posture. Neither spoke at first. The girl simply looked up at Claire, her lips trembling. Without a word, she extended the postcard toward her. Claire took it gently, unfolding the paper with care. In a simple, neat script, the words read, "Thank you for not walking away." The T. Message, so brief yet so profound, settled over Claire like a sudden weight she hadn't expected to carry. Who were these strangers? Why had they come to her doorstep on such a bitter night? And what did the postcard mean? Before Claire could ask, the man's voice broke the silence. "Please, may we come inside? We don't have anywhere else to go, tonight." Something deep within Claire stirred, a mixture of compassion and instinct. And without hesitation, she stepped aside. The door closed softly behind them, shutting out the cold world outside. As they sat around her small kitchen table, the little girl, Emma, she learned, curled into herself, the postcard never leaving her grasp. Lucas, the man, spoke quietly, revealing a fragment of their story. A journey marked by loss, fear, and a desperate hope to find safety. Emma's mother had left the postcard for her before disappearing, a message of gratitude and faith in the kindness of strangers. Claire listened, feeling the invisible threads of connection grow stronger. This wasn't a story about perfect families or easy resolutions. It was about broken people trying to hold on to the fragile pieces of hope they had left. Outside, the rain began to fall harder, tapping a gentle rhythm against the windows. Inside, beneath the soft glow of the kitchen light, a new story was beginning. One of courage, trust, and the quiet power of showing up when it matters most. Days passed since that cold November night, yet the weight of Emma and Lucas's presence lingered in Claire's home and her heart. Emma, the little girl with the tear-streaked face and the fragile grip on a crumpled postcard, was no longer just a visitor. She had become a quiet but powerful part of Claire's life. The postcard, its edges worn and words faded, was a tether to a past too heavy for a child to carry alone. Claire watched Emma with a tender, cautious curiosity. The girl's silence was not from shyness alone, but from a world too complicated for simple words. Lucas, meanwhile, wore the exhaustion of a man who had fought too many battles, some with himself, others with the world that seemed determined to keep them apart. One evening, as the gray sky melted into twilight, Lucas finally began to share the pieces of their story. It was a story stitched together with pain and resilience, with shadows cast long by loss and secrets best left unspoken. Emma's mother, a woman who had vanished without explanation, had left behind more than just a postcard. She had left behind a life tangled in mystery, one that now threatened to unravel what little safety Emma and Lucas had found. Emma's mother had been caught in a world of hardship, abandoned by family, struggling against forces that seemed indifferent to her pain. Before she disappeared, she had written the postcard for Emma, a small act of love in the face of despair. "Thank you for not walking away," the message said. It was an acknowledgement that someone somewhere had stayed when so many others had left. That someone was meant to be Claire. Lucas explained how he was not Emma's father but a distant relative who had tried, against all odds, to keep her safe. But safety was elusive. The law, social services, and distant family members with their own agendas had complicated their fragile peace. They were caught in a tug-of-war where Emma was the prize and the stakes were heartbreakingly high. Claire felt the raw edges of her own empathy stretch and grow. She was no stranger to loneliness and loss. The walls she had built to protect herself were cracking, piece by piece, under the weight of Emma's silent suffering and Lucas's quiet determination. In the days that followed, Claire found herself navigating a maze of phone calls, paperwork, and legal jargon. She had never imagined she would be drawn into a battle that wasn't hers by blood but by heart. Yet, every time she saw Emma's hesitant smile or the flicker of hope in Lucas's eyes, she knew she could not walk away. The nights were the hardest. Claire would sit by the window, watching the city lights blur into rain-soaked reflections, thinking of the girl clutching that postcard, a symbol of love and resilience that had somehow found its way to her doorstep. Emma's past was a puzzle with missing pieces, but Claire was determined to help her find a place where she could belong. This wasn't a story about fairy tale families or easy endings. It was about people who had been broken and bruised, trying to piece together something whole from the fragments life had left them. It was about the strength found in unlikely bonds and the courage it takes to keep fighting, even when the world seems set against you. As the days grew colder, Claire's resolve grew warmer. She was no longer just a bystander. She had become a guardian of hope, for Emma, for Lucas, and perhaps in time for herself. Claire hadn't expected how quickly her quiet life would change. The days following Emma and Lucas's arrival became a whirlwind of emotion, decisions, and unforeseen challenges. The warmth of her small apartment was a fragile refuge from the storm that seemed to follow them all. Emma, still clutching the worn postcard, was slowly beginning to trust Claire, but the shadows of the past lingered in every glance, every silence. Lucas was fighting battles on many fronts. Social workers visited with questions that felt more like accusations, and distant relatives appeared, their eyes filled with doubt and suspicion. It was clear that not everyone believed Lucas had Emma's best interests at heart, and Claire found herself drawn into a fight she never imagined, one where trust was fragile and every word carried weight. The courtroom became an unfamiliar place, cold and sterile, where Emma's future hung in the balance. Claire sat silently, watching as lawyers debated. Evidence was presented and the past was laid bare in a way that was both painful and necessary. Lucas stood firm, but the toll was evident in the lines etched deeply on his face. Through it all, Claire discovered pieces of herself she had long buried. Memories of her own losses, the loneliness that had shaped her, and the quiet strength she had carried in the face of hardship. She realized that family wasn't always defined by blood, but by the courage to stand together when it mattered most. Emma, in the center of this storm, began to show signs of healing. Small moments, a hesitant smile, a soft laugh, a whispered thank you, reminded Claire why she couldn't turn away. The postcard remained with Emma, a symbol of the love and hope that had survived even the darkest times. The community around them started to take notice. Neighbors offered quiet support, and friends Claire had long neglected reached out. It was as if the fight for Emma's future was awakening something deeper in everyone, a reminder that kindness could be the strongest force of all. As the courtroom drama unfolded, Claire felt a growing determination. She wasn't just a guardian by chance, she had chosen this path, and in choosing it she was discovering the true meaning of family, one built on trust, resilience, and the willingness to believe in something better, even when the odds were against you. By the time the legal battles began to wane, Claire, Emma, and Lucas had forged a bond that went beyond words. They were no longer strangers thrown together by circumstance, but a fragile family, ready to face whatever came next. In that quiet strength, Claire found a new purpose, a reason to hope, to fight, and to believe that sometimes the most unexpected moments could change everything. The courtroom battles had left their marks, on papers, on people, and on hearts. Claire watched Emma grow in quiet strength, the once fearful little girl now showing flashes of courage that surprised even herself. Yet the shadows of the past still lingered, sometimes casting long silhouettes in the quiet moments when no one was watching. One evening, as the golden light from the setting sun filtered through the curtains, Claire sat with Emma at the kitchen table, carefully tracing the edges of that worn postcard. Emma's fingers trembled slightly, her eyes distant as if recalling memories too heavy to hold alone. Claire reached out, her voice soft but steady. "Do you want to tell me about her? Your mother?" Emma nodded slowly, the weight of words pressing gently against her lips. What followed was a story of love and loss, hope and heartbreak. Emma spoke of a woman who fought fiercely for her child, but was caught in a world that offered little mercy. Her mother had dreamed of a better life, one where Emma could laugh without fear and sleep without nightmares. But life had a way of pulling people under, drowning their dreams in silence. Claire listened without interruption, feeling the fragile threads of Emma's story weave into her own heart. She realized then that this journey wasn't just about protecting Emma from the past. It was about helping her build a future where she could find joy, safety, and above all, belonging. Lucas joined them later that night, his presence steady and reassuring. He shared more about the sacrifices made and the battles fought, both visible and unseen. It was clear that every step forward had come at a cost, but also with a quiet hope that refused to be extinguished. As days turned into weeks, Claire noticed a transformation. Emma began to open up, to laugh, to play, and to dream. The postcard, once a symbol of pain and uncertainty, became a reminder of the strength found in love and the kindness of strangers who choose to stay. But life, with its unpredictable twists, was not done testing them. New challenges emerged, old wounds reopened, and doubts crept in from unexpected places. Yet through it all, Claire's resolve never wavered. She was learning what it truly meant to be family. Not perfect, but real. Not easy, but worth every struggle. Together, Claire, Emma, and Lucas faced the world with courage born from the deepest parts of their hearts. And in that shared strength, they discovered something extraordinary: the power to heal, to forgive, and to create a home where hope could finally take root. The days grew colder as winter settled into the city, but inside Claire's small apartment, something warm was blossoming. Emma's laughter, once rare and fragile, now filled the rooms with a lightness that seemed almost impossible given the darkness they had come from. Yet beneath that joy lay a quiet resilience, hard-won through pain and uncertainty. Claire watched, Emma with a heart full of both pride and sorrow. The journey they had taken was far from over, and the past still whispered in the corners of their lives. But Emma was learning to carry it differently now, with strength instead of fear, with hope instead of despair. Lucas was a steady presence through it all, a man shaped by hardship but driven by a fierce love for the child he was trying to protect. Together, the three of them had formed a bond that defied logic and circumstance, a family built not by blood but by choice and courage. One evening, as snowflakes began to drift silently against the window pane, Claire found herself reflecting on the meaning of family. It wasn't the perfect pictures in magazines or the happy stories told on holidays. It was the quiet moments of sacrifice, the endless patience, and the unwavering commitment to show up even when it was hard. Emma, curled up with a book by the fire, looked up and smiled, a simple gesture that carried the weight of everything they had endured. Claire knew then that this child, who had once sat crying on a bench clutching a postcard, was no longer defined by loss. She was defined by the love that refused to let her go. But the world outside was still watching. There were questions to answer, doubts to silence, and battles that would test them all again. Yet Claire felt ready. She had discovered a well of strength within herself she hadn't known existed, a strength born from compassion, determination, and the quiet power of hope. In the end, this story wasn't about rescue or redemption. It was about what happens when broken people choose to fight not just for survival, but for a life filled with meaning, connection, and love. And in that choice, Claire, Emma, and Lucas found something truly extraordinary, a family that no force could ever break. Winter was fading, and with the first hints of spring came a fragile sense of new beginnings. Claire, Emma, and Lucas had weathered storms that tested their hearts and spirits, but they were standing stronger, bound by something deeper than circumstance, a chosen family forged in resilience and love. The past still held its shadows, but those shadows no longer controlled them. Emma's smile was no longer hesitant. It was steady and bright, a beacon of hope that had been kindled through countless small moments of courage and kindness. Claire saw in her the promise of a future that was no longer dictated by loss, but shaped by possibility. Lucas, too, seemed lighter. The heavy weight of uncertainty that had once clouded his every step had begun to lift, replaced by a quiet confidence born from fighting for what mattered most. He had become more than a protector. He was a partner in this fragile new life, sharing in both the burdens and the joys. Together they faced the world with open hearts, knowing that life would still bring challenges but also believing in their ability to overcome them, not because their story was perfect, but because it was real. It was a story of imperfect people who chose to show up for one another, to heal together, and to build something whole out of broken pieces. One afternoon, as the sun warmed the streets outside and birds sang their hopeful songs, Emma pulled out the postcard, the same crumpled note that had started it all. She held it close, then looked up at Claire with eyes full of gratitude. "Thank you for not walking away," she whispered, the words carrying the weight of everything they had been through. Claire reached out, taking Emma's hand in hers. In that simple touch was a lifetime of promises, to stand by her side, to protect her dreams, and to keep fighting for the family they had chosen to be. Their story was not one of perfect endings, but of new beginnings, of love found in the most unexpected places, of courage discovered in the darkest nights, and of the undeniable power of showing up when it matters most. And in that truth, Claire, Emma, and Lucas found something that changed everything: hope.